Duncan Smith. Good of you to come in, Iain. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Well, your thoughts on what's been a pretty stunning night for your party?
It's been a good night for us, particularly considering the forecasts just before everyone went to the polls was that it would be pretty static in a hung parliament. It's far from that now, and if the projections are right, we'll be fortunate enough to end up being able to govern with a majority. So that's an excellent position to be in, and I think the public has responded to what I thought was a remarkably clear set of messages about getting the economy right, getting more jobs for people, giving them greater security, and more than continuing those important reforms to welfare and to education and to the economy that will deliver an end to the deficit and an end to borrowing, which is critical, really.
You're a very experienced campaigner. Was there any point during this campaign where you thought you might be in this position?
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. The answer is yes. I'm not just saying that, but I did so many marginal seats and so many candidates, and the single message I was getting back, and I was testing this on the doorstep, and I know I'm not alone, by the way, a number of my colleagues kept saying to me, we're puzzled about this. What we saw on the seats was movement. We saw dynamic movement between UKIP and the Conservatives and then some Liberal Democrats. We didn't see any of that reflected in the polls, and I kept coming back and I was saying to them, I don't quite understand this. This election is far from static when you're on the ground, but it seems static when they're dealing with the polls. So some dynamic's gone missing in the pollsters, but it was definitely on the ground, and colleagues and candidates were telling me that, and I saw it myself. So I don't say I predicted this, but what I did say was that I thought we were going to do better than the pollsters thought, and I believe we have done dramatically better.
David Cameron won't be complaining to have a majority, clearly, because a majority is far better than what went before for you.
Yep.
But majority government, if it's a majority of 2 or 3, is also something that's tricky. And it's not always possible to get things through. I'm thinking back to the 90s, and which you will remember extremely well, and all the problems that John Major had.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing for somebody to do.
It's not. And the key thing, I think, for any government, and I know the Prime Minister knows this and thinks about it, and those who have been around in difficult days like that, will say, whatever else we now do, we keep it simple, we keep it focused, and we absolutely stick to our manifesto commitments. And colleagues who came in to support us have supported that manifesto. So I think it's quite legitimate for the Prime Minister to want them to back and support that. But, you know, the whole process is about understanding how to make legislation where you need to, but not do legislation where you don't. And I think that actually this is a real positive. So today is a real positive moment that we actually cross the line into a majority government as a Conservative, which we haven't done for a little while yet. So that's a great moment.
So two big issues just to pick up on. The proposed referendum on our future in the EU. That's clearly non-negotiable because that's been a commitment. And secondly, your response to this remarkable turn of events in Scotland where the SNP has simply swept the board. The fact that Boris Johnson last night, for example, was talking about some kind of federal solution for the United Kingdom. Is that something that you find attractive? Or, at least from your point of view, what should the response be to the outcome in Scotland?
Well, can I deal with the Europe issue first? The Prime Minister has been very clear about this. He stood on that as a manifesto pledge. He said at the time, should we have to go into any kind of agreement, this would be one of the red lines. Well, we don't have to do that now. So the party knows that this is one of our key commitments. We've made a pledge. The public will not forgive us if we don't meet that pledge. The Prime Minister was absolutely determined to do that, as is the whole party. So that, I believe, amongst the manifesto pledges, should be delivered. And I will be very pleased to do that, because I've been a believer for many, many years, as you know, that the public needs to have a say on this, otherwise this will go on and on and on. On the second issue, I think, yes, there are some issues here, obviously, and the real point, however, is this. I don't think that the election in Scotland was an election about another referendum. Nicola Sturgeon made that clear. She said this is about Westminster, and she said this is not about a referendum. So what... You know, in the hullabaloo of politics and elections, we all know that everybody makes these great statements, but at the end of it all, what we have is a united kingdom. And I'm a passionate believer in the United Kingdom, and we have to, as politicians, SNP politicians now in having got those MPs, and ourselves as the governing party, have to make sure that we sit down and we sort out that relationship between us. Prime Minister indicated as much just after his result. And I think what you'll find is this is going to be a group of practical people making a practical process that actually allows us to keep the union together and govern well for every person in the United Kingdom.
We're expecting Mr Cameron to say something a little later. I'm bound to ask you whether you're keen to stay in the job you're in.
I'm keen to do whatever is necessary to help the country. So whatever the Prime Minister feels about that, it's over to him. It's always over to him at the end of the day, so there's not much point in me commenting on it, really.
Iain, thanks very much. Good to talk
Pleasure.
to you. Thanks very much. Well, in a moment, we'll be talking to